This video is sponsored by Green Dragon Fest. Why play D&D in a castle when you can play in the Shire in Knoxville, Tennessee? Green Dragon Fest is not a convention. It's 3 days of tabletop games with some of your favorite designers and dungeon tubers like Bob Worldbuilder, Kelsey Dion, Justin Alexander, Dungeon Dad, Deficient Master, DM Scotty, and me. Your meals are covered and we play in Ancient Lore Village, and you stay 10 minutes away, or you can upgrade to on-site and stay in your own Hobbit hole or Elf tree house. Tickets are going fast, so click the link below. And Fate of the Norns Ragnarok, my favorite Viking RPG. If you love the Northmen, this game is for you. Steeped in Viking lore and mythology, Fate of the Norns uses a unique diceless resolution system and has beautiful art and layout, and you can play authentic Viking classes. Fate of the Norns is awesome. Check it out at fateofthenorns.com. Link below. On with the show. This past week, Matt Mercer and Critical Role ended their Bell's Hells campaign after 4 years and 120 episodes in an epic 5-hour battle with Predathos the Evolving. At the same time, I was planning an epic conclusion of my own. One of my regular players, Gene, passed away from complications following heart surgery this past September. I have never had a player pass away, and to be honest, I wasn't sure what to do. Does his character die? Does he continue as an NPC? It's something I'd never considered before. The answer came from my players. They suggested I create a scenario in which Gene's longtime character, a bounty hunter called Holger Richtenvoss, goes on one last epic adventure and faces off against a worthy opponent and either dies a hero fighting to save his friends or retires peacefully to the country with his character's wife and children. We invited Ray, Gene's brother, to play Holger Richtenvoss for one last adventure. In this video, I break down the conclusion of Bell's Hells. No spoilers, I'm just talking technique. I share how I plan my conclusion and how you can plan an epic conclusion of your own. Stick around for Dungeon Craft. Professor DM here. This channel is about all things tabletop role-playing games, and if you enjoy that content, Deathbringer, tell them what they should do.
Like, subscribe, bell, comment, newsletter, Facebook, X.
Last year, I happened to cross paths with Matt Mercer. We met in a hotel restaurant, and my wife asked, "Hey, what do you think of my husband's thumbnails where he gives you demon eyes?" And Matt laughed. He said it was all cool. It's part of the game, and he knows that. I said, cool, because I've already got another demon-eyed thumbnail ready to go when Bell's Hells ends. It's going to be something like Matt Ends It All. He laughed again, gave me his approval, and thanks, Matt, for being such a good sport. If you saw the red end, you were not disappointed. Everything from the game mastering to the scenery to the cast and their enthusiasm was on point, and the battle was epic. But sadly, most campaigns don't end this way. And that's because I think many of them die of attrition. People lose interest or move away, and the campaign dies not with a bang, but with a whimper. I want to change that. After all the time and effort game masters and players put into a story, I think it deserves a dignified conclusion. Bell's Hells lasted 120 sessions, but the average D&D campaign only lasts 7 sessions. We know that from Wizards of the Coast market research. And if you don't believe me, you want to watch my interview with 5e lead designer Mike Merles coming up next week. He reveals that statistic is actually true, and a lot of other secrets as well, so don't miss that episode. Now, Matt Mercer has an advantage that most of us mere mortals don't have. He knows his players are going to show up next week because, well, they're investors in the show. They're paid to be there. Some of them, like Sam and Travis, are even the producers. And knowing that campaigns run for only 7 sessions, I would urge you not to plan 100 sessions worth of material that your players will probably never see. But just because your campaign lasts 7 sessions doesn't mean you can't have an epic conclusion. And if you want to see how I do it, check out my videos of The Lost City and The Reviled Society. Both of those campaigns took characters from 1st to about 4th level, and we played for only 5 or 6 sessions. But each had a clear conclusion and an opening for a sequel, if that's what we wanted. In other words, I make one movie and look at the box office receipts before I plan an entire cinematic universe. I'm looking at you, Universal. Now, an epic conclusion has 4 crucial elements. First, epic stakes. In the red end, the fate of Exandria is on the line. In my game, the bad guys have built a weapon that can destroy the entire city. The players should know the stakes as early as possible. They need to know what they're fighting for. and what they can lose if they don't succeed. In Critical Role, Predathos can eat gods. He has multiple forms. This is a great technique because once he's killed, he can come back. If you have an epic level villain, a Predathos, a Vecna, a dragon, all of your players will concentrate their firepower onto one single target. So the target needs to have either healing capabilities or different forms they can come back in to continue the fight. One thing I caution against is raising the enemy's armor class too high. Rather than do that, I always give more hit points. I want all my players to be able to get a chunk of that guy, to feel they at least contributed. Now, if you don't want to do the giant epic villain, the other option is to split the player's firepower between multiple villains, and that's what I chose to do. The first is Venema Lash. She's an evil wizard who was a former lover of Franz, one of the player characters, and a former friend of one of the other player characters, Natasha. Venema and Natasha are foils. They're both spellcasters who are tempted by the dark side of power. Very similar to Imogen and Laudna in Critical Role. Venema wants to overthrow the city government and establish an oligarchy of wizards. Natasha is sympathetic to the cause and almost joins her, but then changes her mind and stays loyal to her friends instead. This gives Natasha and Venema a kind of Magneto, Professor X kind of vibe. So the conclusion is not just about defeating the big bad. The stakes are personal. The second villain is the Corpse King, a powerful warlord wielding a rune spear that drains levels on a successful hit and kills the PC on a natural 20. And I make all my combat rolls in public.
This is the Deathbringer way.
To make a conclusion feel epic, lives have to be on the line, and death has to be a real possibility. And I don't play with death saves. If you get reduced below 0 hit points, you roll a d4. You can fight for that many rounds, dragging your entrails behind you. But after the d4 rounds, you die of blood loss. This allows you to keep fighting, possibly even until that big bad is slain, which I think is more epic than a death save where you just roll every round to see if you don't die. And if you fail, you don't get to participate. But the Corpse King is not your average warlord. He is secretly the son of Venema and Franz. I start dropping hints as to the Corpse King's identity right at the beginning of the session, but don't reveal it until Franz and the Corpse King are locked in battle. Again, the stakes are personal. Now, the Corpse King isn't just a bag of hit points to be killed. There's an element of tragedy, which makes the situation feel more epic. The third villain is Dr. Groper, a mad scientist. He's built a missile out of moonstone, a type of meteorite, and is planning to use it to blow up the city. Also, there's this guy. I call him the Malignant. He's what I call a softener. He softens up the PCs at the start of the battle, reducing their hit points, spells, and resources. The characters should be down about 25 to 50% strength by the time they defeat this monstrosity and are ready to move on to Venema Lash and the Corpse King. Which brings us to the third element, a dangerous environment. If you're ever going to build a terrain set piece and drop it on the table, the conclusion is the time. When Matt dropped the Predathos miniature, it is imposing, the terrain looks terrific, it's awesome. For my conclusion, I built a ruined tower and observatory from scratch. I modeled it on the old GW Skullvein Manse. There are lots of bridges, catwalks, and ledges. I find battles on high places are always filled with tension, and I may show you how to make this on a future episode.
Like and subscribe, it really helps the channel.
Now, FYI, I play a very low-level campaign. I don't allow flying spells, flying magic items, or flying species, so gravity is a consideration. Also, did I mention the tower is collapsing? Because the fourth element is the ticking clock. This element is present in every fantasy and adventure and action movie and book you have ever seen, but it's often overlooked in TTRPGs. I have 2 ticking clocks. First, Dr. Groper has converted the observatory into a giant cannon. As soon as the players make it to the second tower, I roll D4 plus 1, and the countdown to the missile launch begins. But wait, there's more. On the same round, the entire observatory will collapse, and anyone caught inside will die. But that's not all. You might ask, why don't the players just spam the observatory with fireballs? Why are they going to risk their lives trying to cross that treacherous-looking bridge? Great question. Venema has kidnapped children from the local village, and they're hanging in this cage, so the characters have to rescue them before the tower collapses. This gives non-martial characters something heroic to do besides fighting. I can't stress how crucial time limits are. They give your conclusion a sense of urgency. Do your players always stop to take short and long rests to recover their hit points, their spells, and supplies? If so, it's probably because your scenario doesn't have a ticking clock. And without a ticking clock, the big bad is just a giant bag of hit points, and combat can become a slogfest, with both sides just pounding the other until one of them doesn't get up anymore. I think it's more exciting to have a time limit, and anyone remaining in the disaster zone, monsters or heroes, is blown up, buried alive, or dropped in the lava. Precious! I'm not going to spoil the ending of Critical Role. I've gotten in trouble for that before. But in my game, the heroes stormed the tower, cut through the enemy hordes, rescued the children. Britt, the thief, took out Venom Alash from behind with a sneak attack. Franz killed his own son with a natural 20. And Jean's character, Holger Richtenvoss, made it to the top of the observatory, punched Dr. Groper's lights out, and stopped the launch. I gave him one roll to jump from the collapsing tower to safety, and he made it. Against insurmountable odds, Holger Richtenvoss got his happy ending. But it could have been tragic, and that's okay. In Wrath of Khan, the Enterprise defeats Khan but loses Spock. He dies a hero's death, sacrificing his life for his friends. That option should be on the table.
Righteous. Real heroes are willing to sacrifice their lives for others. That's what makes them heroes.
What type of ending will it be? Will it be happy, sad, tragic? That's for the dice to decide. At least, that's what I think. What do you think? Share in the comments below. Also below, you can get the quick start rules to Deathbringer and sign up for the Deathbringer newsletter. There's also a link to Patreon, where I have a whole series of Corpse King videos, including live plays. Thanks to all the patrons for making this content possible. One last thing before I go. Many of you know I had a video earlier in the year where I talked about how I had cancer. I got good news from my oncologist this week. It has been completely eliminated. I still have to be on drugs for over 2 years, but I'm happy to be cancer-free. Now, when you get a cancer diagnosis, even if they catch it early, it's heavy stuff. It's the kind of thing that makes you stop and think and wonder, what did I do with those life insurance papers again? I was lucky. I made it. Jean went in for heart surgery, the same type that Mick Jagger and Arnold Schwarzenegger have had. They made it. Unfortunately, he didn't. About a month before that happened, I invited Jean and Tom, we've been playing together since we were about 14, 15 years old, over to my house to play Blade Runner. It was right before Gen Con. I was running a scenario at Gen Con, and I had never run the game or played through that scenario before, and they were kind enough to volunteer to be my guinea pigs. We didn't know it at the time, but that was the last time we would ever play a game together. So I want to urge you, play games with your friends as often as you can. You never know when that last session is going to be. And I want to thank Jean for all the great times we spent around the table, chucking dice, pretending we were people that never existed. They're some of the happiest memories I have. Godspeed, Jean, wherever you are. May all your rolls be 20s. All right, here we go. All right, wow. Thanks for sticking around until the end. Click on these videos for more dungeon craft.